Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, even many decades after the creation of the United Nations, there is still a clear gap between the existing obligations of member states under international humanitarian law and human rights law, and the reality for populations at risk of genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. In the past year alone, vulnerable populations are exposed to heightened risk of serious human rights violations and other crimes behind the veil of the COVID-19 pandemic. There has been a marked increase in stigmatization and hate speech at a time when we should demonstrate solidarity against a shared challenge. This intolerance has persisted throughout the pandemic, with a particular worrying trend of increased incitement and violence towards national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities. As imperfect as the multilateral system may be, we must acknowledge that we are at the helm. Member states are the United Nations, and the failures are our own. We have to fight hate speech and encouraging interreligious and intercultural dialogue. And we have to boost dramatically our efforts to make the United Nations relevant to all people, everywhere, to children, women, young people, old people, indigenous people, migrants, refugees, those who live in remote areas, those who live in slums, those who live next to us. Everyone must contribute to and benefit from the 2030 Agenda and the culture of peace. Excellencies, as member of the General Assembly, you are of course aware of a number of the issues before you, which are also on the agenda of the General Assembly. A just and lasting settlement to the Israel-Palestine conflict on the basis of the vision of two states is still pending. The Palestinian people have been living under occupations for over 50 years. Essential needs of the Palestinian refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the occupied Palestinian territory are met by the UNRWA, the longest-standing UN agency and a lifeline for more than 5 million Palestinian refugees. Hence, providing sufficient and sustainable financing to the agency is essential. The largest humanitarian crisis has unfolded in front of our eyes for a full decade now in Syria with hard-to-describe ordeals. Nearly 16.2 million are food insecure in Yemen, where famine remains a serious threat. Libyans have been suffering for almost a decade. The situation in Myanmar is a matter of deep concern. The military coup was a strike on the democratic processes in the country, and the increasing loss of life since then is alarming. In the same spirit of responsibility for the people we serve, I join the ASEAN leaders' call for an immediate end to the violence in Myanmar. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the values of tolerance, solidarity, respect, and cooperation have been cited as essential to tackling threats to peace, including non-military threats such as climate change, environmental degradation, extreme poverty, and exclusion. Let us not forget that our responsibility towards others is, in effect, a responsibility to ourselves and to the community of humankind of which we are part. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, we have seen the importance of protection and prevention in a different form, and that by protecting others, we are ultimately protecting ourselves and the community at large. I call on all member states to take measures to protect their populations, paying particular attention to the challenges facing the most vulnerable groups and those marginalized. The flagrant disregard of international humanitarian and human rights law by state and non-state actors is beyond the pale. The weaponization of food, sexual and gender-based violence, the deliberate targeting of schools and hospitals, and the destruction of religious sites is unacceptable. At a time of universal suffering, it is unimaginably cruel. Yet it continues. There is no backstop, and it is our responsibility to protect civilians, to stop hate speech when it is first uttered, to protect and uphold the rights of every individual without distinction, to condemn incitement, harassment, and violence against persons or communities, to take timely and effective steps to protect communities that are under threat of mass atrocities, to prevent future acts of genocide, to ensure accountability and justice. I thank you and I wish all the best in your endeavors today and tomorrow as we work to create a better world for all.